Welcome back. So today we are back to motorcycle modifications. Some of you may be familiar with this bike. If you're not, go and check out the video where I took it scrambling. You'll be aware that this gets a pretty hard time and it is absolutely brilliant off-road, but there are just a couple of little bits that I'd like to change. So today I'm going to be making a few modifications that will hopefully make this handle a little bit better off-road. So let's start at the front of the bike. These handlebars are absolutely brilliant. Geometry wise, there's not much wrong with them, but they do have quite a bit of flex. When you're hitting some of the harder bumps, when you sort of get into a big berm or something like that, you can feel them flexing. It's a pretty unnerving feeling, and that's something I want to sort out. So there are a few ways I could sort this out. I could weld in a strut in between here. I could also just get a clamp-on handlebar strut. That's not something I want to do. I want to go about modifying and making a set of my own handlebars. So what I have got are these. I've got no idea where they came from, but I found them in my little parts collection, and the geometry is pretty similar. These look great, but they do tend to be a little bit wide. So the fact that these are 2 inches narrower should be better for handling, but also it's going to create less flex because there's less leverage. That being said, I'd still like to customize these. I'd like to make them a little bit different. So what I'm hoping to do today is create my own bent up little brace in here and also add a few little gussets and drill some holes. That way I can get that strength and rigidity, but I can also make it look a little bit racy and a little bit different. So we're going to start off by modifying the bars. So I got really lucky with finding these handlebars in my parts box because the ones I've got on there are a little bit of an odd geometry, but I really get along with them, I really like them. There's just a couple of bits I'd want to change. And these bars hold those properties. So the next thing that's great about these bars is they're steel, which means I can get in there and weld them. I don't possess the tools or the skills to work with aluminium. So what I want to do is add my crossbar in there. Now there are 2 options for crossbars. You could go with solid round bar or you could go with tube. There are kind of perks to both. So tube is harder to bend, but it's stronger. Round bar, really easy to bend, but not as strong. And you will see either of those in older style handlebars. Today, I'm going to be going with tubing. So I've got this lovely little length of tube here, which is pretty much just right. So bending tube can be quite difficult because the properties of tubing kind of lend it towards kinking, and we really don't want any kinks in there. I'm not going to be using a pipe bender today, but there are a couple of things and little tips and tricks that are going to help us bend this. Firstly, this is thick wall mild steel tubing, and the thick wall really is a massive help. If you've got thin wall, it's so easy to kink. This is going to be kind of a little bit more resistance to that. The other thing is I'm going to be using a hammer. Now, if you're going to do this, you really want either a rawhide mallet or maybe even a copper-headed hammer. And the reason for that is it takes out a little bit of the blow, it won't mark the material as easily, and therefore it won't encourage so many kinks, or any kinks, hopefully. Now, this kind of technique can only really be used for really shallow bends. You couldn't do a 90-degree bend or anything like that with them really, but for what I want, I think it's going to work. So the very first thing I need to do is make a little template for the bend, the radius that I want to put into this bar. So that's a really simple thing to do. All I'm going to do is attach chalk to a length of string and put it at an anchoring point, and then I'll just use it like a big compass, and that should give me a lovely smooth arc to follow. Now it's time to get around to bending. So I'm going to take my tube over to the anvil, and I'm going to use my copperhead mallet to put a bend in there. Now, something that is important with getting a nice smooth bend is to carry on your bend past where you think you need to. So if you think you only need to bend that long, you actually need to carry it on all the way to the end. Otherwise you'll get this weird little straight portion at the end. So I'm going to be bending almost the entirety of this tube, and I'm just going to be bending a little bit, bringing it over and matching it against my chalk line. If you have to unbend it, it's far more difficult than actually just doing the bend right in the first place. So work slowly and just check it against the template. So I've just finished bending that up and it matches the radius of the template bang on. So that's great. Now, in an ideal world, I would have used the rawhide hammer because it's much less prone to putting any dents or divots in there. But my one's a little bit knackered, so I ended up using the copper mallet. But I got away with it. There are no kinks and there are no flat spots either. So that is beautiful. I've changed my mind on how I want them to sit in the bar. So originally, I wanted them to sit kind of like that, but I am going to go a little bit more similar to the Bates handlebars, which involves them coming up like so. So the next thing I need to do is cut these down and start shaping these ends so that they will be a nice snug fit in the handlebar, and then I'll be ready to go ahead and TIG weld them on. Right, so I've welded on my crossbar, and I have to say I'm really quite pleased with how they're looking. They're looking pretty good, but I do want to take them one step further. Now this is a case of I'm a little bit unsure about this bit, but I'm going to tack it on and I'm going to see, because if I can do it, then I think it'll make for a pretty nice set of bars. So what I'd like to do is these little gussets here, so they will sit in the corner, something like that. Draw them out, just looks a little bit more serious, and again differentiates them for the rest of the bars with crossbars out there. So what I'm going to do is cut those out of some sheet steel, drill the holes, tack them on. I'll go hold them over the bike and see how they look. So, I've finished my gussets, and opposed to tack them on, I've taped them on, I've popped them on the bike, and I really like them. I think they look very, very smart. So that is the general idea that we're going with. Now this is really cool because one, it's going to make a pretty serious set of bars. If I get flex in there, I will give up. And two, it's really different. And it's not so far stretched that, you know, it's really modern. Someone could have done it in the past, they probably didn't, but most of the things that you think, oh well, this is a new idea, it's not, it's been done before. So yeah, I mean, I haven't seen it, but I think they look cool. So I'm going to go ahead and prep the areas, clean them up, and I'll start TIGging them on. Right, well, I've just finished up welding the gussets into the bar, and honestly, I have done a diabolical job. I really struggled with kind of taking a break from it, letting it cool down, and then coming back to it. I'm also really hot and bothered, but no excuses, I've done a crap job. But I still kind of like them. The welds honestly look like they've been stick welded, but maybe that'll make it look a little bit more period correct, I don't know. We'll run them, I'll see whether I can live with them, and we'll take it from there. So the next step is to take it over to the bike and fit them. So handlebars are fitted now, and honestly I'm a big fan of the way they look, and they feel really good as well. The fact that they're slightly narrower feels a little bit more planted and the stiffness is quite nice as well. Now, I will be riding this home, so I'll get a little taster of how they are then, but at some point I'm going to need to get out there onto some more off-roady stuff and give them a proper review. How do they really feel in comparison to the other ones? I suspect they will be better. The other thing is that awful welding doesn't look so bad once it's on there. You don't really notice it, and being that this bike is kind of rough and ready, I'm not too bothered. So I think we'll probably stick with those. We need to move on to our next upgrade, and that's going to be foot pegs. So I'm going to whip the foot pegs off, and I can tell you all about what I've got planned for those. So what I have here is a standard Triumph 5TA 3TA footrest with an AJS foot rubber on there. Now, why is that foot rubber on there? Well, this actually came from the AJS upstairs, and when I got the bike, this foot peg was snapped. I just finished the bike and I wanted to ride it. I didn't have a foot peg. So I just welded on a bit of metal, and that was the only rubber I could find to fit on there. Now, being that that's snapped and this one is bent, I've got no problem in modifying these for more suitable off-road use. The issue with these is they take, as you've seen, a rounded foot rubber. Now, that's all well and good, but when it comes to off-road riding, the moment you've got a bit of mud on your foot, a bit of water from going through a stream, if it translates onto those foot rubbers, they're like ice. They become really, really slippery, and that's no good to me. So what I've got here are these Universal Trials foot pegs. These are very, very popular in like pre-65 trials, and I've used them before. They're very good. The only grumble I have about them is that they come zinc plated, which is good if you don't want stuff to rust, but they're sold as a weld-on footrest. Now, you do not want to weld to zinc because it will create zinc oxide, and that's not good for humans. So we'll have to strip off the zinc before we get around to welding those on. The very first thing I'm going to do is just cut these footrests down to the point where I think it's going to be best to weld on those new footrests. Okay, so I've propped the bike upright, and I've also fitted the stump guard again, because that's going to be quite important as to whether the foot peg can go lower or not, because it will block its movement at some point. And I've also just popped the foot pegs on very, very lightly, and this is going to allow me really to mock these up before I weld them on. I'll probably tack them on the bike and then check them, and then I'll do the final welding. Now, the other thing I forgot to mention about these is obviously these fold. The original ones didn't, and that's probably how one got snapped. That's a pretty handy thing, especially off-roading. If you go over, you don't really want a foot peg whacking into the side of your foot, so if they can fold up, that can help a little bit. So that's another good aspect to these. But what I'm going to do now is just play around with these location-wise, and then I'll go ahead and tack them on. Well, I've tacked them on whilst they're on the frame, and there's a bit of back and forth in really. I had to cut them off, re-tack them several times just until they were right, because you can move them on the taper, but because they're different, they can end up in strange locations. So to actually get them in a place that's comfortable and in line with the other side was quite difficult, but I think we've done it. So I've got the welder on, I've cranked it up quite high because I want to get really good bit of penetration in these welds. This is not as strong as if the whole thing was drop forged, but I need it to be. So I'm going to whiz round there with the welder now, and then we'll see where we end up. Right, so I welded those brackets on for the footrests. As you can see, they're pretty stonking great welds, which should be nice and strong. At some point, I'd still like to add a gusset. I know I put gussets in absolutely everything, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. But for now, I'm going to fit them because I want to see how they feel when I ride them. I might not like them, who knows. So I'm going to go ahead and fit these back on, which also is going to involve refitting the sump guard as well, and then we'll take a look at where we're at. So my foot pegs are back on, handlebars are looking pretty smart. I'm quite pleased with the progress today. The reason I haven't been working on the chopper in this week's video is I ran into some more problems, stuff that involves getting inside it. I know I'm being very cryptic, but I'm saving that for another episode. So when I've got the motivation to deal with this ever-growing list of problems that is the chopper, I will get round to that. But I thought today I would solve some problems on this motorcycle. That, and I've got quite a busy summer, but later on in the summer I've got a couple of events that I'll be doing on this bike. I also want to do some green laning on it, so really I need to get the modifications rolling now, so that I've got time to see how they work, and if I need to make any adjustments I can. Hopefully at some point I can get together with some of my Triumph mates, and we can do a big green lane video with the whole load of us. But that is it from me today. Massive thank you to you guys for watching. Let me know in the comments below, do you prefer the handlebars I've got on now, the ones we made today, or the ones that were previously on there? Appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you next week.